we are recording this session. You will be able to access it again afterwards, but it does mean that all of your questions as they come in and are answered will also be being recorded, so just so that you're aware of that. Okay, well, I think we'll get started. It's great to see so many of you here. We've got more than 60 people in the room, which is just fantastic, and it shows how eager you guys are to hear from people who have actually been through the process. So my name is Emily Allen. I am a BARBRI tutor, and I'm going to be chairing this panel event, but the most important people here are the panel members. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you 4 of our BARBRI course graduates who then have gone on to sit in the very first sitting of the SQE1 exam in November, and have very kindly agreed to give up their time in order to attend this event and answer your questions about their experiences both on the BARBRI course, but also, probably most importantly, their experiences in the SQE1 exam. So at this stage, let me ask you guys on the panel, can you please introduce yourselves, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your background and what you are currently doing as well, so that our attendees have an idea of where it is that you're coming from. So Ali, if I start with you, can you introduce yourself, please? Oh, Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Emily?
Yeah, I can hear you. Brilliant. Ali, would you be able to kick us off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ali. I'm from Lebanon, and I'm currently based in Lebanon. I have a non-law degree. I originally hold a master's degree in management. I studied here in Lebanon. I then went on a job lookout and was able to join an intellectual property firm in Lebanon. I worked in trademarks, and then I moved to Dubai and joined Bird & Bird, an international law firm, as their paralegal, also with people working in anti-counterfeiting and trademarks in general. In addition to assisting on other areas of law as well, such as corporate and commercial law. My employment was terminated when I was in Dubai due to the pandemic, and I had to come back to Lebanon. When I came back, I decided that I want to become a lawyer, and this is based on my experience within the legal field. So I started studying for the SQE with BARBRI, and gladly I passed the SQE1, and I'm currently on the second course with BARBRI as well, and studying for the SQE2 exam happening next April.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that, Ali. Ash, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, yeah, so my name's Ash. I am based in Bristol, where I'm from. I'm from sort of a law academic background. I did law as my undergrad. I then went down the sort of city law, commercial law route, and I had 2 training contract offers from like city law firms in London, which I turned down. So I could have done the LPC a few years ago, but yeah, I turned it down because I realised I didn't want to do commercial law. I went back to uni and did a master's in human rights. Then I was working as a paralegal in a human rights team at Owen Mitchell when I started SQE1 with BARBRI, and then I'm now doing a PhD, which I started at the end of September last year, which I was kind of balancing whilst doing the SQE course and the exams. So that's where I'm at now. I'm still doing the PhD. And SQE2 is going to come for me probably in about a year or so, a bit later, once I've managed to sort of scrape together some money from my PhD salary. Yeah, so that's the position that I'm in at the moment.
Great, thank you for that. Nick, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello everyone. My name's Nick Dennis. I work at the Law Society. I've been working at the Law Society for 15 years. Basically, I fell into it by accident. I haven't really had any other job apart from this job, which I really enjoy, which is great. But by the time I really got excited about law and thought about it didn't really work for me with a mortgage and kids and all that sort of stuff. So when the SQE came in, it was a potential for me to actually, see if I could qualify. Thankfully, I passed the SQE1, and I'm hopefully going to do the SQE2 in October.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. And Sarah Jane, last but not least, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, so I'm Sarah Jane. I'm based in East Anglia. When I did my first degree at university, I did French and German, graduated, had no real idea of what I wanted to do, and sort of like Nick, fell into the job I'm in. I work for a firm called Ashton's Legal, and I started out as a legal assistant in their French legal services team because I wanted to use my languages. Realised that it was something that I very much enjoyed, and sort of looked at various different routes into law. And at that point, this was now 6 years ago, the SQE sort of hadn't come into being yet. So I'm actually on the Solicitor apprenticeship. So I did a 4-year degree whilst working, and then did SQE1. Again, as with everyone else, thankfully passed that. And now I'm with BARBRI again doing SQE2 with the intention of taking that in April.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so you can see we've got very diverse, if all very high achieving panelists here, which is fantastic. If you have got specific questions that you want to ask our panelists, then by all means put them in the chat box. I will be managing those questions after I've gone through my own list of questions. So put them in. I'm going to ignore them for now, but I will come to them at the end. So feel free to be typing as we go through the initial questions that I've got. Okay, so panel, I'm going to be asking you questions and feel free to chip in as and when you have got particular answers. But I suppose the obvious place to start is, why did you choose BARBRI? When you decided that you were going to sit SQE1, why the BARBRI course rather than any of the other options?
I mean, when I knew I wanted to do SQE as soon as it was even mooted like 5 years ago. I thought, yeah, this is a path I can do and fits into my lifestyle. So when I started looking at different courses, really there were very few providers for a start. More established legal universities hadn't really got involved at that point. And really the thing that really appealed to me about BARBRI was the experience they had in America doing similar types of exams. So the SQE1, for example, is pretty similar to the New York bar exam, and BARBRI have many years of experience of helping students pass, this intense multiple choice question type of exam, which we can go on to about how, I'm happy to talk about how intense it was, the exam. So I thought BARBRI was best placed, to help me know how to deal with the exam.
Yeah, great. Okay. Any other reasons from other panelists as to why you chose BARBRI?
Yeah, when I first looked into the SQE and learned more about it, BARBRI is listed on the list of training providers on the SRA website. I think one of the top 3 on the list. So the name just clicked in my mind, and I thought to actually go into your website and read more about you. I was amazed by how many years of experience you have, especially in giving prep courses for the US bar exams. And even if the SQE is a new way to qualify in England and Wales, but the way the exams are done, it is similar to other jurisdictions such as the US. So that's why I was excited to go with BARBRI, because I knew that BARBRI will use the 50+ years of experience that they have in the US in prepping people for to sit the US bar exams, and put that experience into good use for preparing students for SQE as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And were any of you tempted to go down another route? So, SQE or LPC? Was LPC ever an option for any of you? Not really. That wasn't never on the card. So why did you choose SQE? Why was SQE the best choice? Ash?
For me, a big part of it was funding. So I got fully funded through BARBRI, through the essay competition, which I'd fully recommend for everyone to apply to, because you can get full funding, which is like incredible. Yeah, I was on you know, measly paralegal salary and affording it. Like it is expensive. I know it's a lot cheaper and more affordable. Well, it's cheaper and more affordable than the LPC. But by the time you've added in kind of the cost of the exams and stuff like that, like it is an expensive thing to do. It's like, you know, it's a financial commitment. And some people can't afford to do it. And I was one of those people, I just couldn't afford to do it. So I think without having the fully funded nature of it, or with that SE competition, you can also get partial funding as well. I wouldn't have been able to do it. And BARBRI was the only provider that had that option. So for me, that was, you know, why I went down that route. And I'm really glad I did, because I really enjoyed the course, and I passed. So
yeah.
Yeah. So
you're partway there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so perhaps then the next thing to consider is what it was like. So when you started the course, what was your experience of the course? Did it live up to expectations? Did it exceed expectations? Were you disappointed? What was the BARBRI course like for you?
So for me, you know, I'm very positive about the BARBRI course. Possibly why you invited me, Emily, as well.
Nothing to do with it, Nick.
Nothing to do with it. But I think, you know, what I thought was absolutely brilliant was the personal learning plan that was given to us. So, you know, if in a traditional way, if you're studying, you can spend a lot of time, you know, planning your learning, getting out your markers, working out what to do when, and this and all stuff. It's a beautiful way of procrastinating. Once you clean your desk, then you do your chart, how you're going to learn, all this sort of stuff. But what BARBRI did is they basically told you what to learn when, and put it in sort of bite-sized chunks, mainly 20 minutes, no more than 40 minutes, all this sort of stuff. And so for someone like me who's got a full-time job and a young family, that was, every time I switched on, I knew I was doing great learning. And the other thing about the SQE, which is super challenging, is you've got a whole bunch of different areas of law to learn, which some are related, some are not. So you know, BARBRI made sure that everything I did was focused and productive. So for me, that was really, I think, what was really, really great.
And Nick, actually feeding into that, perhaps you could just tell the people in the room which course length you opted for and why you chose that course length.
Yes, so I went for the long one. Is it 40 weeks? Yeah. And I mean, the reason why was because of the busyness of my life. So essentially from mid-January until the exam, I was doing 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, until in the month before exam, I'd obviously sort of ramped it up a bit. But I had to be able to spread it out because I didn't have time to you know, university, I did nothing, and then everything in a month beforehand. So I chose that way of doing it, and I think the course, the way it was set up was beautiful for that rhythm, and it really, you know, the things they tell you when you're younger at university. So if you study a bit each day, you get to the end point, you know what you're doing, actually works.
Yes.
I wish I knew that when I was 18, so yeah, so I did the 40-week course, but because of the way the personal learning plan was set up and all that sort of stuff, it allowed me to consistently do bits focused each day, and that in the end, that all added up to a big bunch of knowledge that happily got me to pass the SQE1.
Great, thank you for that. Any other panelists that want to share what the experience of the course was like for them? Sarah Jane, I can see you've come off mic.
Yeah, I mean, I very much sort of second Nick. The personal study plan was just a godsend, really. It's, you know, as he said, everything is in bite-sized chunks and it's divided into weeks, and you can clearly see what you're meant to achieve each week. And sort of on the home page, it says that you need to do roughly 1.2 hours per day to keep up with the personal study plan. And I very much found that was true. And sort of I've obviously been studying and working at the same time as well. And for me, I was just able to neatly fit that 1 or 2 hour slot in before work to then, you know, sort of have my working day and then still have my weekends for much of the time, which for me was sort of very important. And I think it also means that it's not too intense at any one time. If you do the 40-week course, I felt it was very much structured with a full-time working person in mind, in terms of the amount you're expected to achieve, sort of, you know, throughout.
Perfect, thank you, Sarah Jane. Ash and Ali, were you both on the 40-week course as well?
Yeah, I was on the 40-week course.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, same here. I was on the 40-week course, and I want to add something, Emily, and I mentioned this in my testimonial to BARBRI, which was shared last week, that half of the burden of studying law is to plan for it, and with BARBRI this is done for you. So the personal study plan is just incredible, because everything you need to know about when to study and what to study exactly is in front of you, and you can access the PSP and just apply what's required from you. So it's all about commitment, and just stick to the plan and trust it, because I know at first it will sound a bit weird and it could be messy sometimes, but once you start and just stick to the plan, you will find yourself in a very comfortable position. So my experience with the PSP and the BARBRI course is just incredible, I think. And after all, we passed the SQE1, so it did the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with 79% of our BARBRI candidates who sat the exam, 26% higher than the Kaplan pass rate. Can I ask any of you?
Emily, before you continue, something that we all got a personal learning plan, which is amazing, but also the tutors were really good as well. Which I have to mention because you were my tutor, of course, but I know this across the piece that people were speaking to, tutors got back to you quickly. So it's a virtual course, and a lot of it's online, of course, and that's, you know, that's very useful. But actually there is that human element there, and so if you asked a question, you know, you would get an answer within a couple of days generally, and also if you wanted to meet your tutor within a week, you know, normally within a couple of days, but definitely within a week, you get to meet with them, have a half an hour chat, and they would be responsive to your actual needs as well. So as well as having all that stuff virtually set out in really interesting ways of learning, you know, there was that human element you could call on, and my experience and my friends on the course who did the experience as well found it was very responsive. So I think it's important worth mentioning that as well.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's actually what I was going to ask. Did you use your learning coaches during the programme? Ash, you came off mic as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump off the back of the other question of sort of like, did it meet your expectations, of course? And I would just say with the personal study plan is like brilliant if you stick to it. But obviously, I think someone mentioned in the chat as well, obviously it doesn't factor in like holidays, sickness days, if you just fancy a day off, because like it's just 1.2 hours a day doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're doing it every single day for the best part of a year, it is knackering on top of a full-time job and everything else. So obviously, well, when you miss days, it will go up a little bit, like what you have to do to catch up, and that can feel like a little bit overwhelming. I remember I went away for 2.5 weeks and came back and was like, oh my god, you know, there's a lot to catch up on. But if you do it incrementally, which I think is what you recommended in one of your emails, Emily, was just to catch back up incrementally rather than trying to take a few days off work and cram it, you can build it back up. So you just need to follow it basically and believe in it. But yeah, there are some weeks where you think I feel behind, or I did anyway. I think some other people were ahead, but
lots of people fall behind at some stage. It's completely normal, and like you say, if you just catch up incrementally, it's not a problem at all. Also worth mentioning that the PSP has actually been improved since you guys were doing the course, so now you can tailor it. So if you know that you're going to be away for 2.5 weeks, you can block that out of your availability, and the PSP adjusts and ups your daily learning a little bit for each day. So that's something that would be available to new candidates that you guys did not benefit from, unfortunately. Okay, so course was positive, but then of course the crucial the pinch point and the real test is sitting the exam itself. Now you've already all mentioned that you passed, which is fantastic, so clearly it did the job. But how was the experience of sitting the exam, having done the course? Did you feel fully prepared, and if not, how not? If so, what parts of the course did you find particularly useful for getting ready for the exam?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah?
Oh,
Sarah Jane?
Sorry. So I think the other three will echo this. The exams are very intense. There is a lot going on in a very short space of time, and it is very exhausting. And, you know, I think presumably most of you will have sort of like done an undergraduate degree or sort of other types of exams, and it's just so far removed from any of that. So I think expect the unexpected in terms of, you know, just be very prepared to be very tired, and it's almost, as well as legal knowledge, it's a test of your stamina to be able to care enough the second day in your last exam to continue answering the questions. I think, Emily, in terms of the last thing you just asked, with sort of what BARBRI provided to prepare, I mean, I thought the preparation was excellent. I still found the exam difficult. I'm not going to lie. I don't think that BARBRI could have really done much more. But in terms of what was really useful were the mock exams and the constant influx of new questions that were available, and to be able to practice sort of in exam conditions was incredibly helpful, because 90 questions in a row is a lot. And so I think BARBRI really prepared us very well in terms of providing that sort of mock exam feel in advance of the actual exams.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah Jane. Ali, I know that you were also about to say something. How did you find the exams?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Sarah about the intensity of the exam, and it was really difficult and challenging. I mean, we're talking about 180 questions over 2 days, so 360 questions in total. So that's a lot. And literally, when I finished each day, I felt super exhausted. I needed rest. But to answer your question about whether we went into the exam feeling confident, I was actually confident, because I think the amount of questions that we had with BARBRI prepared us really well to sit for the exam. And like I mentioned previously, the questions that we had on the PSP, I think they were a bit similar with what we had in the actual exam, although some questions were really surprising. So like Sarah mentioned, you have to expect the unexpected. It's really challenging. It's a super exam. This is what they called it. But BARBRI definitely prepared us well. The mock exams that we did with BARBRI prior to the exam were really helpful. So for future students, I say definitely stick with the plan and do all your questions, and definitely do the mock exams, even if it sounds frightening, but definitely do them.
Yeah.
So, Emily, yeah, I mean, the intensity, we've all talked about it, we can't understate it. I mean, in the hour break, I wandered around the local shopping centre, sort of recovering as if I'd been in a fight with a heavyweight boxer, just trying to get my mind to decompress after it. And literally, between Monday and the Thursday, you will not really revise. You know, the next day afterwards, you have to sort of step away from it and you do a little bit of revision. And it is something that, yeah, is very different to other sort of learning experiences I've had in the UK. I think the thing that is, I wouldn't say, you know, BARBRI didn't prepare us for, because I don't know if they could have prepared us for it really, is the language that they used in the exams was trickier than the language that was used in the mock tests, and the mock tests were brilliant. But quite a lot in the BARBRI mock test, quite a lot of the answers, the right answers, were sort of mirrored correct legal language phrasing, which of course, you know, essentially means that they're going to be correct. But in the SRA exams, the answers were very much in non-legal language necessarily, so it wasn't as easy to get to the right answer. So I think in that sense, it was really hard to get the feel of how I did. Now, I luckily ended up passing pretty well, but if you asked me before it, I'd say I was 50-50, because it was just, yeah, you weren't really able to assess how you were doing. And as Sarah Jane said, I think the thing is, it's almost impossible to prepare for is that intensity, you know. So there's some really good BARBRI, as well as doing sort of, they do like bite-sized, like half an hour up to an hour mock exams as you go along, mock tests, and then you do have mock exams. Obviously, if you do it in your living room, you get up, have a cup of coffee, walk around, you know, you do a 91. It's not the same as going to a test centre and that sort of intimidating environment. So that is a sort of extra stuff that you need to prepare for. And I think you need to be aware that when you sit down and do your exam, you're in a new and different environment. It won't be the same as all the practice that you've done. The practice you've done, apply it. But yeah, so I think that was the sort of toughest thing for me.
Did you guys, or any of you guys, engage with the workshops that we offer right before, in the run up to the exam, about, you know, what to expect from exam day, and did you find that helpful?
Now, I think one of the best things that I was taught, along with all the content, obviously, was how to cope with this type of exam. So essentially, the way the exam, each question is written, is basically partly written to get you to do the right answer, but everything else is written to mess with your mind and throw you off the track. You know, and so BARBRI sort of told us about this technique, which is, so if you've got the paragraph of information, then you've got the question, then you've got the 5 answers underneath. So the BARBRI technique, very roughly, was read the question, understand which area of law it is, because, by the way, the intensity is partly the fact that you have taught next to contract, next to constitution, then taught, then, you know, I mean, you know, when I tell people, like experienced lawyers, about it, they you know, their mouths go open. But so you say, okay, this is contract, and this is you know, to do with, I don't know, maybe is a contract valid? And when you then you read the paragraph, and you can pick out the key bits that's relevant to it. Now, and then once you've done that, in your head, you have the answer. Then when you look at the 5 questions, you pick the answer that's closest to your answer, or if there's 2, then you narrow it down to those 2, and you pick between those 2. Now, for me, I found that technique absolutely brilliantly, and this is going to sound quite arrogant, but I didn't feel very arrogant, but for each of the tests, I finished about 40 minutes early, then went back and looked over a bunch of answers. But the reason I finished 40 minutes early is because I did that technique. I went bang, 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 and I tried to avoid what the exam does in terms of tricking your mind and making you question yourself. Now, obviously, when I left the exam, I was like, wow, did I do this right? Did I just miss a load of things? But ultimately, my results were good, so I didn't. So I think, you know, that teaching on how to approach this question and how to focus and trust yourself, you know, because you can, rather than tripping over yourself in terms of the exam techniques, I think really helped me to pass.
Great, thank you. Ash, I can see that you've come off mic as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with one of the workshops in preparing for the exams, one of the tips that that was given was about like time management, basically, with the questions, because it's such a huge amount of questions, and the timer, I don't know if they're going to change it for the next exam, but for us, the timer counts down, and it's impossible to tell where you are and whether you're on track to finish. And so I think it was something like 10 questions every 15 minutes or something. I don't know if everyone
that's
else
right.
watched that. Yeah,
that's right.
And you get given a whiteboard in the exam. So I was sort of tallying off every time I did 10 questions, and I wrote a table. So I was like, what number question you should be on? You should be on question 11 by minute 16, I guess, or like 21, like question 21 by minute 30 or whatever it is, and ticking it off as you go. And it was a real motivation booster. It sounds stupid, but I love ticking things off a list. So as you're getting through like an exam, and you kind of lose track of time and everything, it's really helpful just to be like, oh, okay, I'm on that question now, I'll tick it. And then every time I got to 10 questions, my break was treating myself, staring at the wall instead of the screen. So I just kind of sat back in the chair and took a breather for 30 seconds, and then I got back onto the next one. And you do plow through it. Well, I plowed through it quicker than I thought, and I had time to come back to the flagged questions. And I think I went to the loo about 3 times just to stand up and move around. So like, you do have a little bit of time to, you know, breathe. And I would take that, because I hate staring at a screen for that long. So for me, that was definitely the best, like, practical advice that I got. And I would echo what Nick said as well, just from the previous question about the exam. I came out of the exam and I honestly had no idea how I did. I couldn't tell you whether or not I passed. And I did really well. So like, it does feel like one of those things that you just really can't tell. And I would also say, I learned the most from the practice questions and the ones that I got wrong. So the ones you get right, when you review them, you think, oh great, I got it right. And sometimes you might not even know why you got it right, but you don't really read. I never really read why you got it right. You kind of forced yourself to, but you never took it in. Whereas when you got it wrong, that's when you really learn, or that's when I really learned. So I would, like, don't be disheartened when you get everything wrong at the start, because that's the way you're going to learn, basically. That's how
part of the process.
Exactly. That's what I found most helpful.
Oh, that's great, thank you. So I think you've all started to answer this, but just in case any of you have anything to add, so how well do you feel the course prepared you for the exam? Is there anything that you've not yet covered off that you'd like to add to that?
I think
Emily,
Barbri
I just want to, yeah.
Oh, no, you go, Ali. You go.
Just wanted to add a point about the strategy sessions that you mentioned, Emily, because it's important to mention that part of preparing for the examination is not just knowing the law, but you have to know what to expect during the exam. So with those strategy sessions, we had that in mind already. So for example, Barbri always taught us that never freeze in front of a question, because you don't have time to freeze and think a lot about a question. So for example, if you're facing a question that you have absolutely no idea what to think about or what the answer for it is, just flag it, because you have a flagging system in the exam. So just flag it and move on, because there will be some questions that you might actually know the answer immediately, and some will take you more time to think about. So don't just freeze in front of the screen, but rather flag the question and just leave it till the end. And this is what I did. And because the exam was really difficult, I ended up flagging a lot of questions, which I returned back to them at the end. And I managed to actually finish answer all of the questions.
Great, thank you. Sarah Jane?
I just wanted to say that for me, I felt like Barbri just had the whole package. It had all of the legal knowledge. It had, you get your Barbri study book that you read, and when you first sort of like look at the personal study plan, it looks really strange. Part of Barbri's sort of philosophy is that you do lots of little bits of different subjects sort of all at the same time, and then you sort of like revisit them and things like that. And it felt very odd to start with, because you've got sort of all different types of activity. But honestly, in terms of the legal content, there was really nothing in the exam. There were questions in the exam that I couldn't answer, and I knew they had been in the Barbri study guides, but I hadn't revised them enough myself to be able to answer that question. So all the legal knowledge is in there, and it's just the fact that there's this wealth of sort of exam knowledge in terms of how to answer these questions, how to prepare for the exams, basically everything everyone else has said. And it's just you're not just getting how to answer questions, and you're not just getting here's the law. It's everything combined, and I think it very much puts you at ease in what is quite a sort of stressful 40 weeks of study.
Brilliant, thank you. Anything else that any other panelists want to add to how well you felt the course prepared you for the exam?
I mean, one thing I would add maybe is I did do some extra stuff as well on top of the Barbri stuff, just purely because I understand my own learning style. So for example, I made flashcards as I was reading, and part of that reason, there are two reasons. Firstly, because a lot of the exam is really about getting information quickly, answering information quickly in a sense. And secondly, for me, flashcards were very useful because I could put them in my pocket. And if I was going out for something, then I had 10 minutes, I could like chest myself with some flashcards as well. So I found personally for me that was very useful. Even the process probably of making the flashcards was pretty useful as well. And also I did a little bit of extra stuff like mind mapping, and I might sort of sit down and say, okay, for 15 minutes I'm going to write everything I know about this topic, just like from fresh, just to sort of practice getting that information out, because I think a lot of key with the exam is being able to get that information out. So those are some extra things I added on to the sort of learning that we were told about, just purely because I knew it worked on my own style.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and that fits within the context of the course, doesn't it? Because the first 2/3 roughly is the delivery of new law, and then the last third is revision, which is a lot of MCQ questions, and also some time to do your own kind of revision activities, which will vary from student to student, like mind mapping or flashcards, depending on how you like to learn. And again, Barbri provide workshops to give you tips on how to manage that time. Okay, do any of you have advice? If you could pass on your wisdom, well, that's why you're here, and that's why you kindly agreed to give up your time. What would you say? What would your key point of advice be to people who are about or who are considering embarking on SQE preparation? Anything you do differently, or what is it that you've learned that you'd pass on?
For me, I think the key idea or the key point that I would advise students is to stick to the plan, simply as that. trust Barbri. And I'm not saying that because I'm biased or anything, because I always hear that from people that I'm taking sides or something. But actually, this is based on my experience with Barbri. So because at first, it's very normal to doubt things, because change can be doubtful. And the PSP, like I said previously, you might find it weird at first, especially because it tells you to go from subject to subject and to do this and that. But this is the idea behind this is scientific, and you have to actually trust it so that you are able to succeed and pass. And you will notice the change, and you will notice that this is the right way to do it after a while. It will not show up immediately. It takes some time. So just go through the PSP, do what is required from you, and I'm sure you'll be fine.
Great, thank you for that, Ali. That's great advice. Yeah, and I agree absolutely. Of all of the people I mentored on the first course, not one of them has said, I wish I hadn't followed the Barbri method. But I've heard many, many times, I wish I'd gone for the Barbri method sooner. That would have saved me loads of time. Ash, how about you? What would you pass on to people thinking of getting ready for SQE1?
So I've got two things. My first one is it's a really big commitment, like it's a lot of work. And it's doable, obviously, because a lot of people have done it now, but it is a lot of work, and you kind of need to basically sacrifice your social life a little bit. Like, you know, you can still do things, but like I think everyone's nodding that like it's tough. And if you can have someone to like help out with, I don't know, cooking meals and stuff like that on the odd occasion, just to take a bit of weight off, that's really helpful. Obviously, I know not everyone's in that position. My other thing, I mean, it might be less popular from your side as a tutor as advice, but I didn't really revise or look at tax because I really didn't get it. Yeah, I couldn't get my head around tax. I absolutely hated tax. I hate numbers, and you know, I was trying to learn it. It was stressing me out so much, and I thought I can get away with not doing it. And you know, I got 82% in the first exam and 75 in the second, I think. Just humble bragging, but like you can get away with sacking off a whole topic and really like getting up to grips with the others. I think that's what, as long as you get up to grips with the others, it's okay. So if you hate tax, you can still do it, is my bit of advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Ash. So I definitely don't disagree with that. What I would say is, if you are thinking of cutting out a part of a subject or a subject from your revision, discuss it with your learning coach. Some subjects are bigger than others. There are easy marks to be had in every single area, even tax. So, you know, it's not something to do lightly. But for you, Ash, and for many other people, I think, going for the extra marks on tax and getting total coverage of everything was just not going to be worth the time that it would take. So studying strategically like that, I think it's a great tip. Nick, how about you? What would your words of wisdom be?
I mean, I ditched tax early on as well, because and you are sort of given weightings as well, and the actual tax weighting in the exam is not overly big, and the amount of effort. But anyway, but I agree, if you decide to ditch constitutional law, you might be in bigger trouble. But I suppose the thing is to say that, you know, what you're doing is a really big thing, and it's an important thing, and obviously qualifying as a solicitor is a big deal. So unsurprisingly, the exam is hard, the syllabus is huge, and I think, you know, when I first thought about doing it, because obviously having worked in the Law Society for many years, got good contacts across the piece, and know some areas quite well, some areas not at all. I thought, oh, should I try this on my own? No way. You do need that support, and you do need that organisation, that's help. And you know, obviously my experience with Barbri, and it was brilliant. Without them, I wouldn't have passed, definitely. So you know, it is a big deal. It is hard, but there is, you know, if you find the right course for you, you know, they'll give you the support to help you get past. Also, something we've not mentioned, and I know Ali was key in one of these, but you know, the WhatsApp groups are pretty good as well. You know, so students did get together in WhatsApp groups and discuss things, and I, you know, I set up a little sort of study group with 5 or 6 others. I put a shout out at the beginning of those who might be interested in study groups. We found a group of people who were interested in the same time. So you are able to sort of, you know, that was really helpful as well. So there is, even though it's sort of a virtual course, there is that personal interaction as well, which you know, which is very nice too.
Yeah, definitely good to connect with other people going through the same process, and Barbara would facilitate that on through
And
the
I
course.
just said on the WhatsApp group, because Nick mentioned that I'm managing the WhatsApp group. So Barbara created the group at first for SQE1 students to be able to connect and get to know each other. And I think part of studying law, to be able to survive, let's say, you would need support, and you shouldn't be, and you shouldn't feel lonely, because the content itself is a lot. So if you're on this on your own, it will feel a bit more difficult. So the WhatsApp group was really helpful. Everyone engages every now and then, and we support each other. Whenever someone needs help, we help them. We answer the questions. So it's really important to engage with other students as well, to be able to exchange ideas and, you know, to pass this journey feeling comfortable.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because of your feedback, Barbara, you've actually moved to facilitating setting up study groups. So at the start of the course, you would be asked, do you want to join a study group? And like Nick and Ali have said, we'd strongly encourage you to do that. So you've got that kind of network to help carry you through the process. Sarah Jane, what wisdom would you pass on?
So I would say I'll be really honest with you, I was very skeptical of the PSP. Of the sort of the dashing around the subjects, the little bits here and there, because obviously I'd come straight from doing my law degree, and I was like, well, I know how I study, that's not for me. But I very quickly got on board, and yeah, by all means feel skeptical, but believe you me, there's a lot of research in there. And I think the nice thing is, quite early on there was a lecture where they explain why they're doing it, and I think that really clicks. Then, you know, you're not just being told do this, it's, you know, Barbri says, look, here's what we understand, this is why we'd like you to do it this way. I think also we had a long time to revise after the materials had all been provided to us, and I was feeling very exhausted at the end of the provision of materials, and I took quite a long time doing nothing because I just needed a break. And as a result, I felt quite rushed with my revision. I still had several weeks, but I sort of let a good 3 weeks slip by. And I would just say, try not to let that happen. You know, give yourself a week off, 2 weeks off by all means, but really give yourself an end date where you must start preparing your revision materials, because otherwise you will feel a bit stressed, sort of, and there's no need to feel stressed. And also, I think in terms of planning, Ash, you were saying you went on holiday for 2 weeks, and suddenly, like, as you say, the amount of work you're expected to do each day has gone up. I was lucky in that I had some small holidays planned, but they were quite far in the PSP, and so I spent time rearranging my PSP in my head to get ahead for the holidays, so that I had a week's grace to go on holiday, and then when I came back I was still on time. And obviously, as Emily said, that's kind of been rectified now with the way the PSP will work for you. And yeah, I would just second it, talk to other people. It can be very lonely if you have nobody to rant at who actually understands what it is that you're going through. You know, your partners, your family, they're all there to support you, but they've no idea quite what is sort of, you know, quite what you're being faced with.
Yeah, and use your learning coach as well. That's what we're here for. You know, you can make appointments whenever you like to have a chat with your learning coach about your progress. So use the students and use your learning coaches. Okay,
I think we didn't give sorry, Emily, I think we didn't give our learning coaches enough credit. I just want to mention that the learning coaches are like important, and you should always touch with them, communicate with them, because they can support you in many different ways. So yeah, do speak with your tutor, your learning, because they can support you a lot.
They also really care. They genuinely care. It's not just, they're not just thinking, oh God, you know, another 10 minutes here or there. They want you to succeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you. That is just fantastic to get that kind of outline of your experience of the course and of the exam. I'm aware that lots and lots of questions are coming in, so I'm going to go to the chat box and field some of the questions to you. a lot of the questions that have come in that I've seen popping up have been about managing your time. So I know that you were all on the 40-week course, you all had extensive commitments alongside, and you've already spoken a bit about the challenges and about, you know, how it felt when you fell behind and how you then caught up. Would you say it's manageable? You know, clearly you've passed, but how was it a positive experience? Could you balance it with everything else you needed to do?
Yes. I found it very interesting, to be honest. So it helps if you're doing something that's interesting. So I enjoyed studying in many ways. I'm very pleased not to have to do the exam again, but I really did enjoy the studying. But in a funny way for me, because you know, I started when lockdown was all going on, so my commute completely diminished. So in a sense, I got 2 hours back in the day, so that was quite nice to fit it in. But I said to myself, I do an hour in the morning before I started work, and I do an hour after the kids went to sleep as my sort of, okay, that's definitely going to be my time. But if I had a spare half an hour in the middle of the day, then I could do a spare half an hour right here, and you can do a chunk that's set out for you. So as well as having those organized times, the way the learning is sort of broken up, it allowed you, when you had that ability, you know, so my work sometimes is very busy, sometimes it's quieter. So when it was quieter, I was able to actually do a bit more at different times.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And also questions coming in about what it's like if you haven't studied law before. So people from non-law backgrounds. I know some of you have got legal backgrounds, others don't. What's it like if you haven't studied law?
I don't have a legal
before?
background. Yeah.
So Ali, how did you find it being non-law background?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging because at first you have no idea of what to expect, and especially legal terminology. This is the challenging part. I mean, when I first heard about statute or crown or the like, I was like, what are they talking about? But sometimes you have to also rely a bit on yourself. So do a bit of research and you can find the answer quickly. And also the BARBRI material is just plain English, and so it's not complicated. You will be able to understand it. Now, in my case, I already have legal experience, so that helped me a bit. Although it's not necessarily that my legal experience covered the areas that I studied for the SQE. So for example, I don't have any idea about contracts or dispute resolution or wills, for example. So all of that was new to me because my background was more of an IP law, and you know, IP is not included in SQE. So it could be challenging at first, but once you start, trust me, you will be able to do it with the right materials and with the PSP, like I said. You will be able to understand the law and to apply it through the practice questions and the mocks that you get.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Ali. That's really, really helpful. Nick, you're also non-law background, aren't you?
Yeah, well, sort of half and half really, because I worked at the Law Society for many years. So,
yeah.
I mean, my areas of specialism are employment and company law, but also my work involves a lot of constitutional law. But
yeah.
Back what Ali said, so on the business stuff and the constitutional stuff, yes, I was in there straight away, 100 miles an hour. But everything else, I was starting from scratch, like anybody who wouldn't have had any law experience. So even if you have legal experience, your legal experience will help you a bit in certain areas, certainly. But, you know, I knew nothing about tort or contract or conveyancing or criminal. So that learning experience was the same as everybody else. But, you know, I think that what the BARBRI course did very well is they broke it down simply at the start and built up from the foundations of, you know, what is contract law, what makes a contract, and it built up, and you were able to get those building blocks to start understanding it. I always used to joke with people that tort is a state of mind, and I quite like tort in the end, but I think tort is one of those things that you have no clue and you think it's completely random, and suddenly you get in the state of mind, you're like, okay, I'm a magician, I know how it all works. So feeling like you're being lost in it and don't really understand it doesn't make sense. I think in every one of the sub-subjects is completely natural, and then you'll get to the point where clicks and go, ah.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And I can add to that, we now have got some statistics on BARBRI's pass rates, and as I mentioned earlier, our overall pass rate for the November sitting of more than 300 students sitting was 79%, which is great because the Kaplan pass rate was 53%. So it's more than 25% higher than the overall pass rate. And in fact, you know, BARBRI students would have pushed Kaplan's pass rate up significantly as well. We've also looked at how our law graduate students compared to non-law graduate students fared in the exam. So if you're worried as a non-law graduate, my answer is don't, because basically the pass rates are exactly the same, pretty much. So there's a slight deviation, and the slight deviation is actually that the non-law students performed ever so slightly better and had an ever so slightly higher pass rate than the non-law graduates. But really it's the same, you know, it's not a significant difference. So certainly the course is designed to prepare everyone, including non-law graduates. Okay, I can see some questions coming in about being worried about multiple choice questions and not knowing how to answer them. So Nick, I think you started to address this already. I don't know if any of the other panelists have got any comments to add on what your experience was in terms of getting used to multiple choice questions. Ash?
I would say that when I first heard multiple choice, I thought this will be easy, this will be a breeze. You know, you think, I don't know, we just think like compared to like doing essays at uni, that it's going to be like the easy option and the answer. You know, I don't know if you've done your driving theory, but the answer is always so blaringly obvious compared to the others. But it wasn't like that at all. It was really, really difficult. I would say in most questions you could like happily cancel out 2 of the answers. So you get 5 options and you could happily cancel out 2, sometimes 3. And then there's normally a choice of 2 at the end that you're thinking it could be either of those. With some questions it was obvious and you could from studying, but some it was just sort of more of an educated guess. And I think the BARBRI course like really prepares you for that in the practice questions, like I've already said. Like I think that was 100% the best way to learn. The other, you know, the lectures and the reading the book and stuff is helpful to get the content in, but I think that just the practice questions, just doing, because Emily will probably have the number, but it's like hundreds, if not thousands, of practice questions that you do.
Yeah, it's over 2,500. So yeah, it's a lot. So
it's mad, yeah, the number that you do, but that's just how I learned completely. And then you kind of get like ingrained into this multiple choice question. So for me, the exam wasn't as much of a shock when you sit down and you've got to plow through like loads of multiple choice exams because you've already done thousands by the time that you go and do it. So it's definitely a new way of learning if you've never done it before, but it's doable to like train yourself into that method and way of thinking, I think.
Great, thank you, Ash. Sarah Jane, I saw that you came off mic at the same point.
I think again it's trust in BARBRI's process. I think when it was explained to us how to answer the question as Nick sort of set out, it seems really backward at first, because I found it very easy to be lazy, where I would read the question, I would skim the answers and be like, oh yeah, I think it's this one, because it takes a while to train yourself to just read the bit in bold. Then, you know, it's working the answer out in your head so that you're not misled by the wrong answers. And I think it's definitely just doing them again and again. And I think the good thing about BARBRI is, obviously you've got, let's say there are 2,500 questions and that's it, full stop. The best thing is you can go and do them again. You don't have to just do them once. And when I was first told that, I was thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure I'm going to remember the answers. You don't. You've had so many questions thrown at you, you've completely forgotten the answers to the ones even that you got right. Although, as Ash said, the ones I got wrong, I was more inclined to remember the second time around. But honestly, there's such a wealth, and it's just doing them again and again, and it's just getting yourself in the mindset. And I have to say, I found when I explained to my colleagues, to solicitors, you know, sort of how that it was all multiple choice. When you tell them there's 360 questions, they're like, wow, that's a lot. But the first thing was, oh, that's a bit easy, isn't it? Can you become a solicitor just by doing some multiple choice questions? But yeah, it's just, yeah, focus and just trust BARBRI. Just trust them, they know what they're doing.
Great, thank you for that, Sarah Jane. I've had a few questions in the chat from current students who are getting ready for July, asking, you know, what would you do, and also some specific ones relating to the revision period. So, for example, did you take time off before the exam? How did you manage your time as you get closer? Any tips for students currently on the course, and what you would recommend?
I mean, I took off the week before the exam. for you know, to do an intense period then, but did extra time, but did it around work for 2 weeks. My main revision technique actually was going back doing the multiple choice questions. That was what I found to be the most effective thing, because actually in the way those who are doing the course at the moment will know this, but at the end of each section, during each section you have multiple choice questions as you go along. Then at the end of each section you have main multiple choice questions, which involve the main section and the previous section. So what I did is I did the main multiple choice questions, and I found that was the best way, you know, to revise everything, because you really realize it at the end. So like, you know, if you take the last week off, think, how am I going to revise it? And you realize, wow, I've got to revise 10 subjects. That's impossible. But the multiple choice questions are a really good way of revising those 10 subjects. The thing that I would also be very clear about is don't think that you'll have much time between the 2 exams. Do all your revision for the 2 exams before you start your first exam, because the exam for me was such an intense experience. Did it on the Monday. Tuesday I did nothing because I had to just, you know, get back my head. Wednesday I skimmed over some of my mind maps just to sort of, but I just didn't feel like my brain wanted to do more than I did the, you know, so you know, don't rely for the second exam, that time between the 2 exams.
Yeah, very sensible. Brilliant. I've also had some questions regarding the 20-week course. Now, I know that you guys are all on the 40-week course. The 20-week course is basically exactly the same as the 40-week course, but twice as fast. So rather than doing 1.2 hours a day, you'll be doing 2.5 hours a day, roughly. And questions coming in from people who are working and asking, what do you think? Is that a realistic time frame? Could you get ready for July on the 20-week course if you're working full-time, if you have a family? As people who've been on the 40-week course and working full-time, what would you say?
Personally, I would say no. If you're working full-time, but I guess like you're not dragging out the pain as long because you're cramming it into 20 weeks. So like, you know, I guess if you sacrifice most of your other things, personally I do loads of hobbies and sports and stuff, and I wasn't willing to give that up. I think you would have to give up a lot to do it. You'd probably have to cram it in lunch breaks, evenings, a lot of weekends. As I said, I haven't done it before. I haven't done the 20-week course, but personally I felt the 40-week course was enough to balance alongside full-time work. But I don't know what everyone else thinks.
I agree.
Yeah, and not every full-time job is the same, is it? But generally, if you have a busy life and many other commitments, then the 40-week course is probably going to be better. The next 40-week course starts in April to get ready for the January 23 exam. So you wouldn't have long to wait to start for the 40-week course if you decide you want to take a longer stint. I've also had, Nick.
The way I'd sort of, if you're considering it, so from mid-January until the exam, apart from the last month I did more, I was basically doing 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yeah, 2 hours a day, and you sort of think, okay, I can do 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. Now, if you're going to do it in half the time, can you do 4 hours a day, 6 days a week? And that's the question I think you have to ask yourself. And there's no way I could do 4 hours a day, 6 days a week with what's going on in my life. So so that, I think that's how you should approach it if you're thinking about doing a 20-week course.
Yeah, I think you also struggle to do the personal study plan in the way that BARBRI has tried to set it out for you. So directly before the SQE, I did my law degree while studying, and it was the apprenticeship, so I had 1 day a week off work for studying. So I was working 4 days a week, and then I had a day and then the weekend. And I'll be honest, I had no social life for 4 years. I was doing 20 hours a week studying then, and I appreciate that's completely different from the SQE, but I was able to load that into my study day, into my weekends, whereas that's not the idea. I think with the SQE, it's being able to do it, you know, bit by bit. And as Nick says, can you do that 4 hours a day? And I think it's all well and good to say, yeah, do you know what, I can commit that time in the morning, but I don't know about anyone else. After work, I'm done. I cannot make my brain engage in that way. So I would say, I would say no. I think do the 40-week, just suck up that extra 20 weeks and just do it.
Good, thank you for that. Ali, there's been a question about engaging with the learning coaches when you're overseas, and I think you said you're in Lebanon. How did you find it engaging with the learning coaches? Did you find that they had availability at times to suit you? Did you have any issues with that? Ali, can you hear me?
Yeah. So with BARBRI, yeah, I can hear you. With BARBRI, the also the positive side is I would say the flexibility. So they're not just flexible about sending your materials out and having an online course, but also by having an engagement process with the learning coaches online. So even if you're based in Lebanon or you're based anywhere in the world, you can manage to speak with your mentor whenever you want. I mean, obviously, it would be like it depends where you are located and depends when your tutor is available, but it's all manageable and doable. So for me, I didn't face any issues. So my mentor was Tracy, and Tracy was amazing, and she always guided me and helped me. And I used to speak to her once a month. So every end of the month, we used to have a meeting and discuss where I'm at currently on my PSP and on my studies. Your location is not really a criteria to take into consideration when thinking about how to communicate with your tutor or whether you can do this or that, because everything is online and everything is flexible. So no problems at all, and don't worry about that, definitely.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd second that. My working hours, for example, include the evenings. So if we have students in the States, they might well be allocated to me because that's their daytime. So there will certainly be times available when you can speak to your learning coach, even if you're in a completely different time zone to your learning coach. Can you chop and change each week how you fit your hours in? So did any of you, I've heard that you've had breaks when you've been on holiday and things like that, but did any of you change your routines as to when and how you studied?
Yeah, I just fit mine in when I could. Sorry, Sarah.
No, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say I fit mine in when I could each day. I planned the night before, like my day tomorrow, and if I had something in the evening, I would plan to get up early and do it then, or fit a little bit in my lunch break. Although I would say for me it didn't work doing it in my lunch break on a regular basis. I tried that for about 3 weeks and I was so tired by the end of the day of just like staring at a screen. Right. So for me, that didn't, it felt like it would be convenient, but it wasn't. Like I need to get outside on my lunch break. So yeah, so I just checked it, like sort of chopped and changed every day, and like weeks as well. When I was behind, I caught up, and weeks when I was on track, I, took it a bit more chill. So that was my experience. What about you, Sarah Jane?
So yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, mine was a lot. Sometimes I would wake up and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to spend this hour, doing studying before work. And so I would leave it, and then it would get bumped to the weekend or whatever. And I think also for me, it was very important to have my holidays to be able to go away sort of like at the weekend and things like that. And so when I had a lighter week at work, or when I had no social events at the weekend, I would sometimes dedicate an entire weekend to get myself an entire week ahead, so that I could then sit back and relax a bit. So yeah, it's definitely it's totally flexible for you. It's just, I would say, try to do bits each day, maybe just 3 days a week and then like a bulk at the weekend, but it's very flexible in that respect.
Brilliant, thank you. I've seen a couple of questions about the balance between practice questions and the delivery of legal content. We've mentioned that you get 2,500 practice questions. How did you guys experience the balance between questions and delivery of law?
So I would say the beginning was was law heavy in a way. So you get two fairly chunky volumes with all the law that you need to know for the actual exam, and the reading of those is positioned towards the beginning of oh, did you just show it?
Yeah, Ash is modelling our books for us. Thank you, Ash.
So that's that sort of position towards the beginning, because obviously you need to get that knowledge in to be able to answer the questions. But really, probably right from the very first week, I would say, the minute you've read some of that, and there are lectures as well that you watch, so you're sort of having, you know, this information come in from all different angles. So towards the end of the course, very, very heavy on multiple choice questions, but at the beginning it's much more sort of, you know, spread between the two.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You know, I think, you know, you sort of separate the two, but the reality is the two come together, and you remember the sort of legal theory, shall we say, through how it's been works in practice, and those are the best things. You know, for example, you know, when does frustration happen, you know, or if there's misunderstanding between when a contract's made, and the example they use in the course is ships called different names, and the ships called different names actually really fit into your mind, or, you know, frustration when a rock concert burns down or whatever like that, with nobody in the rock concert, thankfully. But so actually, you know, the two come together, I think, because if you don't think about the real life practice, I think it must be so much harder to remember a lot of how the law works in theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, one other question which came up multiple times, which I think is a really nice one to end on, is about career progression and the future. So variations on the theme. What does your career progression look like? What are you planning next? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Can you guys answer any of those? Take your pick.
Kind of like HR questions at an interview.
Yeah, exactly. So where has SQE1 taken you, Ali?
So currently I'm preparing to sit the SQE2, like I said, next April, which is in 2 months' time, very short time. After sitting the SQE2, hopefully, and passing, I'm just left with passing the SQE2. So I already have my qualifying legal experience registered. I already passed the SQE1, so all I'm left with is passing SQE2. So hopefully, once I pass and become qualified, I'm hoping to join any firm as their lawyer or legal counsel. I mean, primarily my goal is to join an international law firm in the UK, but I'm also open to other opportunities, and it could be an in-house role as well. But this is primarily my career goals. Yes.
Great, thank you for that. Other panelists?
So I'm also doing the SQE2, ready to sit it in April. It's also very intense. Enjoy that when it comes around. And yeah, again, hopefully, provided that I pass, I'm sort of obviously already in a law firm in the French legal services team, so I will qualify into that team as a solicitor. Again, I've already got my sort of qualifying law experience. Haven't quite submitted that yet, but it's sort of there. I've done 6 years in fact. In terms of 5-year plans, I think I'm going to sit out studying for a bit, but I've already been lined up for various different step qualifications at my firm, so there'll be those as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to qualifying and to finally being a solicitor.
Great, thank you, Sarah Jane. Nick, I know that you're clearly very well established at the Law Society. Are you glad that you've done SQE1?
I am. I'm also excited. I did enjoy it, but so I know a lot about law in certain areas, but what I didn't really know was how it was all organised in a lot of other areas. So I feel like my sort of knowledge is a lot broader. Basically, for those sort of questions, if you're in an interview, you have to ask them. But I don't plan my life at all, so I don't know really what I'm going to do. Just the most fun thing that's in front of me. But I think, you know, somebody once said to me, if you qualify, you've got a ticket, you entered. So it doesn't matter. In a sense, you don't have to plan, because there's so much law. Law is everywhere, and there's so many different types of opportunities within law, from legal policy to sort of stuff that I do, to in-house, to city firms, to family, to whatever, to human rights. So I have no clue, but all I know is that I will have many more options.
Yeah, brilliant. And Ash, you've told us that you're doing a PhD, so your next 3 years are mapped out.
Yeah, at least 3 years, if not 4. Yeah, and then I think so I'm hoping to the SQE at some point within that next 3 years, hopefully next year, but I'll see how my financial situation is. And I've done 1 year of qualifying work experience, so I need to get another year sort of paralegaling or something similar. post PhD, and then hopefully, yeah, be in practice in human rights is the plan. But yeah, similar to Nick, you know, who knows? I'm not sort of one of those like planning out my life kind of people. I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now. I enjoyed working in human rights before, so I think I'll go down that route. But you know, I'm very, who knows about it really.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, can I say a huge thank you to our 4 panelists, Ash, Nick, Sarah Jane and Ali. You've been absolutely fantastic and have given participants an insight into what it's like to get ready for SQE1 that no learning coach can possibly do. So thank you so much for coming along and answering questions. Thank you to everyone who's attended. I hope that we've answered your questions. I know that there were a lot of questions in the chat box, so apologies if I've missed any of them off. Let me just put on the screen a slide regarding an upcoming event. So if you want to find out more about SQE, then do come along to our open day. That will be coming up in March if you want to. QR code is up on the screen. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you very much for asking such interesting questions. And once again, panelists, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your wisdom. I'm sure that it has been extremely valuable. I know that I have learnt a lot, and the participants undoubtedly have as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye and good luck, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.